Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Electoral Areas Services Committee for May 21st. My name is Kate Louise Stamford, and I represent Area F for the Regional District. We have our meeting agenda before us, but first, I would like to introduce Alternate Director Bailey, who's over here, and he is taking Director Back's place temporarily. We have an agenda. And again, I've got a nice list here, which I'm totally ignoring. I'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting here on the territory of the Squamish and Sechelt nations. And we have an agenda before us. Is there any additions or edits? Seeing nothing from the board, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? For a second, all those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. So our first presentation is from Megan Turnock, principal for Lees and Associates, and that is our SCRD Park Services Review, and they're meeting on Zoom. So whenever you're ready, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me so much to give you an update on the SCRD Park Services Review. Just going to be sharing my screen here with a few slides to get us going. So I think you can see that now. Great. I'm Megan Turnock. I'm with Lees and Associates. We've been working with Jessica here on the Park Services Review for quite a few months now, and Andrew Banks from Parkwise Consulting is also here today to help answer questions, and he'll also be presenting on another project later, but he's also working on this with us. I'm going to give you a project overview, tell you about some of the key findings in this first phase of work, and some recommendations arising from that, and then next steps. Lee Campbell unfortunately couldn't be here today, but she's been the project coordinator throughout this project and has done a substantial amount of work. So I just wanted to recognize her as well. The purpose of the project was to undertake a comprehensive review of the SCRD Park Services, what you're providing, how you're providing it, everything from operations to the supply and the quality of the parks. So in phase one, really the focus was developing a consistent framework of park classifications, understanding what you have in the system and how different parks serve different purposes, defining corresponding service levels. So I'll get into that a little bit later. Phase two, which we are hoping to undertake in the next month, is community consultation. So bring in some of our key findings and recommendations to the community and discuss that with them, hear what they have to say, and to basically inform the next steps of developing the final parks services plan. Phase three will be identifying the resources required so that the parks can be sustainably and equitably maintained and serviced in the long term. So phase one is substantially complete now with the background review of all policy and background documents, policies and plans. We've done extensive internal engagement with staff. We've done site visits, done benchmarking to similar communities, similar regional districts, also pulled in best practices on relevant topics. And we've developed an interim report. So now we're at the presentation to this committee. And the next phase is to check in with the community. So we're going to have a workshop with community partners, an online public survey, and community check-in events, most likely at pop-ups at community events that are already happening, like farmers markets and other festivals and things like that. So we can get a broad section of the community. And we'll come back to this committee once we hear from the community as well with a summary of what we heard. Phase 3 will then galvanize all our background information and analysis, public engagement information, and bring forward a plan for resourcing, how the performance will be measured over time, and that report will come to the board or committee for consideration. So what are we talking about? The SCRD parks system is quite large, 659 hectares of parkland, 120 parks, and 100 kilometers of hiking trails, multi-use trails, and beach accesses. The park system serves all the electoral areas within the Sunshine Coast Regional District geographic boundaries, including the islands. And it's delivered through a combination of direct operations and staff, contracts, and community partnerships as well. Just to give you a sense of the geography, now most of the park systems are within that lower stretch in areas A, B, D, E, and F, rather than the whole expansive area to the north. But just wanted to give you an idea of the geographic range, as you well know, came up in our analysis. So some of the things we found through our background review and analysis and site visits are just the parks and trails classifications. There is a classification system, but it hasn't really been used, and it didn't really fit with the park system overall. So we're looking at improving the usability of that. The geographic distances of the SCRD are affecting efficiency. It takes time and effort to get to to get from end to end within the park system. So that can be challenging as stretching resources. The level of service at different parks, so how often they're maintained, the frequency of service isn't consistent across the park system, and isn't necessarily matched to the level of use of the different parks or the types of parks that are there. Also, reactive maintenance is occurring. I think there's been impacts from climate change, we'll talk about in the next slide, but infrastructure is aging, and as that's happening, the service delivery is just becoming a little bit more reactive rather than proactive. And finally, there's a lot of demand for parks and park amenities, but there's a challenge in making decisions about which amenities the SCRD should invest in and how to make decisions. There's also significant influence by climate change and regulatory restrictions as well. So drought is affecting park operations, particularly maintaining sports fields, irrigation, making sure that, and then also tree health. As trees decline in drought conditions, there's going to be a need for more arborists and hazard tree maintenance and management. Coastal flooding and sea level rise is impacting a lot of beach access points and other really important shoreline parks. Climate events are increasing and diverting limited park resources. So flooding events has impacted trails and pedestrian bridges, for example, and other parks infrastructure and amenities. And finally, I'll just highlight that the requirements for environmental protection and archaeology, protection of important cultural areas are increasingly complex and require more resources than they did even 10 years ago. So that's also layering on costs and resource requirements to manage and maintain parks. In terms of financial sustainability, just reviewing the vast network of parks and park infrastructure and amenities. The capital renewal funding envelope is less than required to maintain the existing assets. So, as I said, lots of assets are aging and coming to the end of their life at the same, similar and small window of time, which can be challenging. There's not currently development cost charge program for parks, so there's not necessarily that missing that opportunity for additional funding to help maintain and improve parks. And just wanted to highlight as well that most of the operating funding for the park services is through property taxes from the electoral areas only, not currently contributions from the town of Gibson's and District of Sechelt. Let's touch on some of the key recommendations. The overarching service delivery values we developed as a draft to get things started and point in the right direction. So delivering a parks and trails network that connects communities and fosters safety and inclusivity, supporting meaningful and ongoing relationships with First Nations communities, integrating ecological values and biodiversity into parks planning and operations, improving the climate resilience of the park system, aligning park service delivery with the resources available. This is a key element of the service delivery review, and collaborating and engaging with the community to improve efficiency and service delivery. Part of that is as well as to communicate out what the SCRD does and doesn't do and its capacity for the future. So the first piece is about updating the park classifications system. So we have 4 new classifications or adjusted classifications proposed. Within that, we have park management zones proposed as well. So those would be like within a park, and then also a classification system for trails. So a classification system really just provides a framework for managing and maintaining parks for their intended uses. So a regional recreation park might have sports fields to provide a place to play soccer, but a conservation park might be more focused on protecting sensitive ecosystems or endangered species. So active recreation wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. And how those 2 parks are managed and how resources are allocated can be quite different. Park management zones are similar in concept, but they're used to divide up different areas within a single park. So usually a park that's large enough to warrant different zones. So a park that might have sports fields, play area and washroom, but also has forests and trails and streams might have these different zones within it. And those different zones can then also have different resource allocations and management planning pieces. Trails might have a different design, different management, different maintenance, and different uses. But having those classifications also improves consistency along the whole trail length to the greatest extent possible, and so that people who are using those trails can know what to expect as they're traveling along them. The next key recommendation is to establish a park and trails amenities framework and prioritization tool. So this table just is an example of where we're at in terms of using the park classifications, looking at all the amenities and supportive amenities and infrastructure that might be in a park, and aligning those 2 things so that there's a framework there for decision making. And to go along with that, this is sort of a baseline of what might be appropriate in different types of parks. The next step as well is to create a prioritization tool that will help decision making so that the SCRD can respond to amenity requests with a clear rationale and keeping the whole park system in mind. I think that's important. Like community members definitely have valid requests and demand needs, but they may not have the whole park system in mind. And so that's to the SCRD to help understand that and plan accordingly. So it's to move beyond a park by park planning approach, instead looking at that system-wide approach and how a certain amenity might improve access or equity or sustainability. So a prioritization tool can take those things into account. Equity, site suitability, and as well the financial impact of different park amenities. Finally, is a park servicing levels framework. So park classifications and park management zones, as I mentioned, can then be assigned an appropriate maintenance regime that reflects the intended uses so that staff can prioritize and allocate time and resources to make sure that effort goes where it's needed the most. It can also be used to communicate with the public in cases where expectations might be higher than is feasible within the system as a whole. The allocation of effort needs to be aligned with where it's needed, and also, taking the geographic range into account too, not just where it's easiest to get to, but or where service requests are highest. So this can take some of the guesswork out of the operations team, streamline and improve service delivery in the end. So our next steps, that's sort of the current direction of the plan. We're going to be going out to the community to get feedback on the park classifications and amenities provision, how those management pieces will work. So a lot of that is actually information out, like explaining what the park system is and how it is delivered, and then also to get feedback on and answer people's questions on that, and to hear what people value most in the system. And that's in my presentation. I'm happy to take questions or hear discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Directors, do I have any questions from this portion? From the consultants, what we thought we'd do is, rather than going directly into the next presentation, we would do the staff report for this particular section right afterwards, and then go on to the next presentation. So for now, Director McMahon, go ahead.
Yeah, just a process question. I'm wondering if maybe we could do the questions after the staff presentation, because it's not always clear who's going to be the right person to answer the question, whether it will be the consultants or whether it will be our staff. Does that make sense? Or
I'll just see if we have any questions for clarification for this particular portion, and then we'll go directly into it and we can ask all together. Alternate Director Bailey, do you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fine with Director McMahon's suggestion.
Okay. If staff could go through the report, that's 4.1, staff service, parks service review. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The staff report before you today is to seek board approval to advance on to phase 2 public engagement, and also to provide a link between phase 1 analysis, sort of a brief snapshot of that, and how that would tie into the next upcoming phases of the park service review. So as Megan outlined, we're wrapping up phase 1 and seeking support to move into phase 2 public engagement. And from there, we will use the phase 1 analysis layered in with the feedback from public engagement to develop the final recommendations. So the staff report in front of you today is, just as I said, a snapshot of Parks Services' current state and preliminary findings from the phase 1 analysis. and presenting options for next steps, which would be public engagement. And I'll turn it over to Aidan for the PowerPoint presentation.
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, so I'm just going to speak through the engagement plan for the Park Service Review. I know that Megan had touched on portions of it. So I'm going to start off by speaking about learning. We've had two fairly robust engagements into the community, as I know the committee is aware, the official community plan engagement and the solid waste management plan. Through both of those, we've had a lot of learnings that we're going to really look to factor into our approach for the Park Service Review. In both of those instances, we've been bringing forward quite complex projects and distilling them down in a manner which would allow the community to have a really good understanding of what it is that we're trying to do. So some of the learnings that we've had, obviously meeting people where they are, we've discovered, that if we host something, we may get folks kind of through, but we found actually getting out to each of the electoral areas, outside grocery stores, to markets, to places where we know the community is gathering. We found that we've been quite successful in receiving input from the community and also driving them through to answer whatever online questionnaire or anything along those lines that we'll need. As well, it's easy to navigate online resources. I'll get into tools in a moment, but obviously we'll have an online hub for this project with very plain language descriptions of what it is that we're doing. And then as well, promotion through social media. Anything we do in the community goes out to a lot of community groups who we really hope will serve as the conduit for the information to their respective mailing lists. And then obviously news media here as well. We're very fortunate with the paper here, quite good in covering kind of initiatives like this that we're doing. So you look at tactics and tools here, to start off, our proposed engagement period is going to be June 8th to July 3rd. We're going to look at Let's Talk SCRD. As with most of our projects, that'll serve as the online hub for the project itself. I spoke about community check-ins, so we'd be looking to do one of those in each electoral area, and then larger events as well. Canada Day in Seychelles, farmers markets, Gibson's public market as well, where we know that we have families gathering. We have quite a varied demographic to be able to speak to. An online questionnaire. We'll have that hosted, and display boards as well to help explain the project. And we're working right now with the consultant on the look of those. And then finally, you may remember in the official community plan renewal project, there was a big map at the back. We called it the big map, which was right at the back of the tent. And it was really great to allow folks to get a sense of place. And when they looked at that map, they had a sense of what we were doing in those certain areas. So what we're producing is a similar map where we're going to have all of our parks, all of our trails, beach accesses listed too. And what this does for us is, Megan mentioned about, how spread out our parks and trails network is, but as well, it gives a really good visual on what's out of scope for us, right? Which is obviously the municipalities. So I think that will really help as a good visual tool in that regard. One thing which isn't up there, which we're working on too, understanding that we want people's input on parks. So we'll have posters at all of our parks, really inviting the community to go ahead and to jump into a community questionnaire. So what are we asking through our engagement? So, we want to know what people value about our parks and trails. First off, what do they like to do? In the parks then itself, what's important to the community, through accessibility to conditions of parks and trails, natural areas, activities that they want to do in the parks themselves. And Megan spoke about, parks and trails classifications. Again, we will be looking for feedback on those. We will be presenting them in a plain language manner. I think we did a really good job in the OCP engagement of really working to plain language some of what was coming forward there. So we'll be looking to take a similar approach to that. And then the map. So we'll have the big map at the back of the tent, and we'll be asking people, what parks and trails are special to them, and really be looking for that as a good conversation piece for us.
Great, thank you, Aidan. So what's coming up next? Just reiterating what Megan covered in her presentation as well, seeking board support for moving forward with public engagement. We'll also be bringing forward What We Heard report back to the board in September. And feedback received through public engagement will help further inform our Parks and Trail Service Level framework that was outlined in the interim report to ensure that it's in alignment with community values and the feedback that we've got through public engagement. And the final report will also provide recommendations for the resourcing needed to support the recommendations, the park classifications, and service levels that will be recommended to ensure a sustainable and consistent delivery of park services across the region. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Directors, we have two different approaches here. You've got the information from the consultant, but then you have the very specific, the engagement process from staff. So just sense of where or who is going to respond to your question would be helpful. I'll go with alternate Director Bailey because he didn't get a chance earlier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you through you to the presenters, both staff and the consultants. I did consult with Director Bax on several items today, and so please be patient with me as I ask my own questions, but also on behalf of Director Bax as well. My first three questions would be, oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so my first question then would be for the consultants. And my question is, will the final report include specific recommendations on a municipal contribution formula and a fee schedule and not simply flag the issue? And I note that, or actually it was Kelly that noted that bylaw 356, the fee authority already exists, and whether that would be included in the final report.
So that's not sure if that's for the consultant or for staff because it involves our current bylaws. Megan, would you like to answer the first part of that?
Yes, thank you for the question to the chair. I think being very specific about what a specific number or formulation is beyond the scope of this, but we'll be providing some guidance at a broader level of examples because it's just not, there's not one right way of doing it. We can look at examples from other regions and how they approach it. But I think that's beyond our mandate. Hope that answers your question.
Staff, do you have anything to add to that?
Chair, could I ask that the question be repeated again? I found it was a little multifaceted, and I just want to be clear on what was being asked.
Certainly, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Will the final report include specific recommendations on a municipal contribution formula and a fee schedule and not simply flag the issue? Director Bax noted that the fee authority already exists in bylaw 356 and whether the final report will make reference to that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think to Megan's point that that's beyond what Director Bax is asking is beyond the scope of the Park Service Review as it is, and work like that I think will come out in sort of the prioritization and implementation of the recommendations from the final report, Park Service Review. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Okay, I'm going to be the curmudgeon today. The report from the consultants is a good snapshot of where we're at right now with some comparisons, which is helpful. But the recommendations to date are basic to me. They're housekeeping. They're basic best practices for managing the parks. They're not getting into the weeds of how are we going to prioritize what parks we maintain. Like, and are we going to sell any of our parks or get rid of them? Like, how many parks can we afford, or what is all this going to cost? So I'm wondering how we can go out to public engagement right now, because what are we going to ask the public? Like, I know when we talk about the budget, I don't think I've ever had anybody walk up to me and say, let's talk about the budget. But I get engagement all the time about parks. You must get, our Parks Department gets voluminous emails with people saying what they want to see in their parks and what they're concerned about. So if we go out in engagement, like last night I was asked, because we had a presentation on the coastal flooding. And so the first question we got was, so are we going to abandon Chester House? Because it's at the 25-year flood mark. So if we go out, people are going to say, well, what about George Crest Park? Are you going to start maintaining that? And what about Whispering Firs? Is that a regional park? And, what about the trails in Soames Hill? They're not, they're getting overused. So if we're not at the stage of like setting priorities and setting direction for the park system, I'm not sure that we're ready to actually engage. And I'd like to hear from both the consultants and staff what they think.
And so I'll go to General Manager. Okay. I knew it. Gagnon. See, there's too many of you.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I keep losing the names.
No worries. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to take a first crack at this. So I do appreciate the question because it's something that we thought about ourselves. But the reason that we want to go out at this stage with a framework is to see if the framework makes sense. If we start going out with the details, I feel like all we're going to be doing is everybody's going to be fighting for their individual park. Whereas at a higher level with a framework, does this make sense across the scope of all of the parks that we have? And then the second phase is, okay, where does Georgia Crest fit in that framework of classifications, that framework of management zones? Where does Cliff Gilker fit in on that? So if we start with that and the detail, we've really felt that we would just be, everybody would only be talking about their individual park. And we would never get to that, does this classification make sense with the corresponding service levels, with corresponding amenities at a high level? Next phase, we go into those details and we start saying, okay, this is where this park fits from a classification. Just because this community wants all these amenities in that park, if that park fits within a specific classification, we have a framework of what we provide in that. So then in the future, if a group comes to us and says, we want all this stuff in our park, we can go, well, it fits in this classification. If you want more amenities, it's reclassifying that park. That's a board decision, but it would mean it would have a global effect on every park that sits within that classification. So it was a deliberate design to go out to the community with the framework first. So that is why we're going now, and I just wanted to provide that overall sort of thought process behind it, but certainly we'll open up to the consultants or Jess for their thoughts at this point as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And I would like to add in a similar line to Director McMahon is, coming in these later phases, will there be recommendations for how we look at future parks? How do we classify or prioritize how future opportunities come in? So those are the kind of questions that I was seeing is, yes, this is a snapshot, but I'm looking for future recommendations and how we move forward. We recognize that, yes, there is issues with climate change and its impact. How best do we deal with that? What's the most efficient way? So those kinds of questions, I'm hoping they come in another phase, and so that's added to Director McMahon's question. We can
try.
yes, so
Do you want me to?
if the consultant would like to respond to that first.
Sure, thank you for the questions through the chair. I agree, like going out to the public with the framework is a essential step at this point. And I believe, although it is like the park operation, it is a park operations review, so it is a bit of in-house organization and housekeeping and a bit of that setting up those systems for the long term. And so it's a step-by-step process where you set up the systems that will then allow staff and the board to draw the line between those decisions and the financial implications as well, and the implications on resourcing and staffing as well, which I think is a really key element at this point as communities like the CRD and many others that we're working with are wrangling with asset management and aging infrastructure and the climate impacts. So all of those things are going to be creating challenging decision-making, challenging decision-making of for communities. So it is a lot of this is just providing you with some of those underpinning systems to help that decision-making in the future. Hope that helps and sort of supplements the other answer. Thank you.
Do you want to follow up now? Yep.
Following up on sort of on what Director Stanford said, so are we envisioning a second round of engagement where we actually get the rubber on the road and say, okay, you can have a park system that's a Lamborghini, or you can have a park system that's broken down bicycle, and this is kind of what it's going to cost, more or less. But I'm guessing that's not envisioned in this portion of the Park Service review. So when do we get there? Because that's what the public, I think, really wants to know.
So that's more of an engagement question if staff want to provide some direction on that.
Thank you for the question. At this point in time, a second round engagement is not within the scope of the project. However, depending on the board's direction, it's something that we certainly can look at if there's a desire and a need for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
GMG Gagnon.
Yes, thank you. So further to Manager Huntington's comment, she is correct. That's not within the scope right now because we think that initially needs to come back to the board for you to see what are the implications of this. And if you don't want to make a decision at that point, then we can reconsider whether or not we go to the public at that and what that would mean and the implications of that. But before we go out to the public with that, I think that needs to be brought back to you to look at. Because, you know, odds are if you go out to the public and you say, would you like a Lamborghini? Everybody's going to say, absolutely. In my park, absolutely. So I do think that needs to be a point where the board weighs in a little bit, as well as what does that look like to you? Do you want to tweak it before we go to the public? Do you want to have some input at that point in time? Thank you.
Director Gabias.
Now Director Lee wants a Corvette, and I want a bike. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited to see this. I thought this was really interesting. Thank you for the delegation this morning. And I think I understand where Director McMahon is coming from. I think we hear constantly from people in our communities, they want specific things for their specific parks. But I appreciate that right now the exercise is to build a foundation or to create the framework so that we can, at a governance level, make better decisions. Like we're not trying to get into operations and trying to fix, bike racks. Where do we put them? So I'm really excited to see this. I think it's a really great first step. And I'm looking forward to seeing what people have to say. And I really like the engagement angle of meeting people where they're at. I think just from anecdotally, from experience, from going to engagements myself, there's always more people and a more diverse range of voices when staff goes to Welcome Woods Market, when they go to the Half Moon Bay Fair, when they catch people, like grab them as they're walking around, as opposed to when we host specific engagement sessions at the Seaside Center where there's a lot less traffic. So really appreciate that from staff. I do have a question. Did I hear that staff will be putting signs in parks to increase engagement. Did I hear that correctly?
Is that something we're going to do?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Yeah, it is. We in all of our parks we'll have laminated signage there, so that folks can go ahead with a QR code on it, and they can answer the online questionnaire. That's really the focus for us, is to drive people through to that online questionnaire to give us their input.
I've got the sticky microphone again. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. The way I look at the report right now that's in front of us and the decision that we have to make is that what we're actually doing is putting up a common language that we can then discuss and suggest. I can say, oh yeah, I want a washroom, therefore my park has to be like this, you know. And so we'll have some common terminology and some understanding on what other areas do with their parks. So I'm kind of comfortable with it. Thank you.
Alternate Director Bailey, can you, got some more questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I'll ask just because Director Lee and, well, many directors have touched on creating a fair engagement framework. And so I have a question about that. Will the public engagement materials clearly communicate that most current parks receive no, through you, Madam Chair, no routine maintenance before asking residents what service levels they expect, so as to set accurate baselines?
Is that question clear, staff?
Thank you for the question, and I'll attempt to answer it. I do feel that during engagement, and especially with having the big map in the tent, it'll open up opportunities for conversation with residents in the areas where we set up our pop-up shops, pop-up events, to talk about their individual parks or trails that they have interest in, and to talk about the existing service levels, which could be anything from a destination park down to a park or trail that currently doesn't have a service level assigned to it. So absolutely, we will be open to providing that information on an as-needed basis. And also, we do have an inventory of our parks and current service levels right now that we can refer to as well if there's sort of questions, additional questions in terms of level of service that existing parks and trails get. So yes, I think we will be able to answer those questions on an as-needed basis during the events. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
I'm just going to add a couple of questions and we'll go back to you. Yeah. As we're talking about the engagement, there's two parts to this question. How do we differentiate this engagement process with our OCP engagement process that's just completed? And also, how does this then speak to the OCP? Because I think there are going to be overlays for both processes. And I think that's how the public will see this as part of a bigger question for the OCP. So how do we thread that particular needle?
Thank you for the question. I can take it on the first part of that question. I understand that we have been out to the community on a few, as I said earlier, robust engagements. You know, how we communicate about these different initiatives, while there is some commonality in the language that we use across the board, we're quite clear in the purpose of each of them. And I think, again, you know, to Director Gabius's point earlier, the fact that we're going to be out in the community telling them, you know, why we're there, we'll be branded when we're out. You know, we'll be talking about parks. We'll have T-shirts on that very clearly let people know that we're here to talk about parks. We're very fortunate that, you know, within our different departments here, we do have conversations about the different engagements that are going on. That's part of my role, is to kind of play a bit of air traffic control as these engagements come in. So if people do have questions about the OCP when we're talking park service review, we'll absolutely be able to direct them back through our planning staff. But it's not a huge concern for us in that perspective. You know, the What We Heard report is obviously coming in front of you today, and on the OCP, which obviously forms an end to that process for now. So we'll be very clear this is a brand new process that's starting up in relation to the park service review. So I hope that answers the first portion of the question.
Thank you. So I don't want to spend too much longer on this because we do have a large agenda, but Director McMahon, and then we can go back to alternate Director Bailey.
Thank you. I have kind of couple questions left, mostly for the consultants. I'm going to bundle a few together. I hope you don't mind. Are the consultants going to come back with some more specific recommendations aimed at challenges that we have in the parks, like the windshield time for park staff? Because I can guarantee that people in Area A are going to come up and say, why don't we have a parks office in Area A so that the staff don't have to spend all their time driving around? See, I knew he'd like that. And I'm just curious also about things about other regional funding models. For instance, Regional District of Nanaimo, the regional destination parks are funded by all the local governments. But does that include regional destination parks located within the municipalities? Are those also funded through, this inclusive funding mechanism? And two. Okay, and I got to stop there already.
Megan, did you catch those two? I don't want to bundle too much
Yes.
together because there's some big questions there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Chair. I'll try to answer both. In terms of the geographic distribution of parks, once we have the park classifications and maintenance levels established, we'll be able to then identify where staff resources need to be allocated, and then decisions can be made about, local offices, or, it doesn't make sense to add a more localized group of staff. So there will be implications, I think, flowing out that will enable the regional district to make those kinds of decisions. Pros and cons, have the pros and cons in front of them to make those decisions. In terms of regional funding models, you're correct. Many regional districts do receive funding from municipalities for regional park services that serve the region. I think the question was, do regional districts then contribute back to municipal parks systems? I think that was the question. Maybe it could not. Yes.
I've got a nod here, so yes.
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but I can say that there are negotiations between municipalities and regional districts in terms of level of support, both directions. And there are other partnerships, like for the sports fields, which you'll hear about next, where the regional district does work with the municipalities with a shared funding model. So there is possibility of shared funding model that accounts for municipal parks and regional parks.
Thank you. That speaks to what Director Bax had asked for earlier, doesn't it? Alternate Director Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I have three more questions, but I'm going to bite my tongue and choose what I consider to be the most important one left, and it actually dovetails into Director McMahon's question in terms of comparable regional districts. As the classification system, through you, Madam Chair, as the classification system and service levels expand under this review, will Phase 3's resource assessment specifically address the management to operations ratio, given that comparable regional districts are significantly more operations heavy at our scale?
It's for staff, I think.
Thank you for that question. Yes, I think everything's on the table with this review in terms of what we're looking at, resourcing from the planning and administrative side of parks right through to the on-the-ground delivery of services. So yes, I would like to point out, though, that as it was stated in the interim report, it's very difficult to compare in the benchmarking apples to apples with the delivery of park services. Each region is unique in sort of its size, geography, priorities, and each has its own unique set of challenges. So yes, on paper, we have some differences with the other benchmark regional districts. However, our operations, our geography, our community values might not be in sort of the same, it might not be in alignment with the other regional districts. So I think that we need to take that into consideration moving forward, that it is a difficult, it's just intended to provide some examples, but it's not an apples to apples comparison of service delivery for the regional district park systems. Megan, I don't know if you have more to add to that, but thank you.
Thank you to the chair. I think you covered it well, Jessica. I think that makes sense. In terms of management to operations, we are considering whether the internal skill sets are there, and aspects like that, and how that might change or need to change in order to meet the park classification service level goals that emerge from this plan.
Thank you. So Director McMahon and then Director Gabius, and then I'd really like to have the recommendation on the table. Thank you.
Okay, I have lots more, but I'll, in view of the length of our agenda, I was fascinated by the mention of regional parks as natural assets, and I would love to hear more about that at a future time, because I think that is an area of enormous opportunity and a lot of public interest. When we go out to consultation, I hope we address common misconceptions. I mean, I've been told that people think that the SCRD maintains the trails on Mount Elphinstone, you know, other than the ones in Sprockets. We don't do that. We also, the beaches are not parks. And talking of parks, we don't control parking, which is, you know, something that we hear about constantly. So I hope that we will communicate what's in scope and what's out of scope when we're doing the engagement. Thank you.
I'm getting nods on that one. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'll move the recommendations on page 46, and then I have a quick question.
So we have a seconder.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the timeline because I think this is going to be such a great document for the next board. What a great tool for the next board to make decisions. But the timeline, the way I read it, it will potentially be adopted prior to the election, so in this fall. And I'm wondering if there's going to be budget implications, if there's going to be some budget proposals stemming from that into the next budget, and two, like how will the next board be kind of shown this, like how can they actually get a good understanding of this document when they start?
Yeah, I think there's like going to be a library of items that we're seeing now that we're like, yes, this is so valuable for the next board. Staff, this is mainly a staff question. GM Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. So certainly it is our desire to bring this project to completion with this board. It started with this board, it would make sense. It might be challenging to, if we have a new board, to bring them in sort of at that point in time. However, we also know how projects go. So this is the timeline that we have. We are aware of, you know, how we want to approach the fall. So we will be reviewing this over the summer and how things are coming and how things are getting pulled together. But certainly that's our timeline. And then, you know, to the chair's point, there's an orientation for the new board that has a laundry list of things that will be on it for them to learn. But I think it would make great sense if we could get in front of this board. Thank you.
Well, we'll see. So we have a motion. It's been seconded. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the recommendations on page 46? And that passes. Thank you. So next we have a presentation on our sports field strategy. And Mr. Banks, are you going to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. I will be leading the presentation on that. So just stand by as I share my screen. Can everyone see that?
That works fine. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So I want to say good morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Banks, and I'm working with Lees and Associate, and I will be leading this presentation. So for the Sunshine Coast Sports Fields project, this is the agenda for today's presentation. We'll do a project overview, review the current state, review the community needs and engagement results. And from there, we will talk about the vision and guiding principles for the sports field strategy and the recommendations and implementation plan. The Sunshine Coast Sports Field strategy is to provide a shared vision and practical framework to guide sports field planning, management, allocation, and investment over the next 10 years. It was under the direction of the working group that this sports field management plan was put together. And the working group included the Sunshine Coast Regional District, the District of Sechelt, Town of Gibson, the Shisha Nation, and the Sunshine Coast School District number 46. This slide also illustrates the timeline for the project, and we're now at the end. We're presenting the strategy. To develop the strategy, there was 4 key steps. 1, we have to understand the current state, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. Then we looked at the community needs, and out of those 2 steps, we then identified vision and guiding principles. And finally, we developed recommendations and an implementation plan. These steps are all undertaken in conjunction and in consultation with the working group. Current state. For the current state of the Sunshine Coast Sports Fields, we reviewed the existing bylaws, processes, and procedures for all the working group jurisdictions. Key observations were that the Sunshine Coast Regional District, Sechelt, and SD46 have allocation priorities, guiding them in their allocation of sports fields. Not surprisingly, current field booking procedures varied by jurisdiction. The field inventory. The Sunshine Coast has a total inventory of 32 rectangular fields, and 29 ball diamonds at 26 locations throughout the district. Most of the locations feature overlapping rectangular fields and ball diamonds. Overlapping fields allow multiple sports to be accommodated. Overlapping fields may have 1, 2, or 3 ball diamonds in addition to the rectangular fields. One location only has a ball diamond, while 8 locations only have rectangular fields. There is also 2 rectangular gravel fields in the inventory. The primary seasons for sports play, the rectangular fields and ball diamonds, generally occur at different times of the year, making shared fields an efficient use of space. However, the trend towards extended peak seasons and increased off-season activity, such as training, camps, and tournaments, creates schedule overlaps that can be difficult to manage. School district fields. As noted in the slide, school fields are primarily for educational purposes and school athletic programs. As such, they're generally unavailable during school hours and only available to the community outside of school hours. In addition, their size and condition make them best suited for younger ages and practices. Field classifications are an important tool for effective and efficient sports field management. Field classifications classify fields or categorize fields based on factors such as surface type, intended use, level of service, and available amenities. A classification system enables informed decision-making for field allocation, maintenance, and investment. This helps ensure that sports fields are used appropriately and main resources are allocated effectively while managing field user expectations. The work group currently uses the field classifications outlined on the table on the slide to guide the distribution of field buckets and to optimize the use of fields. These classifications are based on field size, field condition, and amenities such as washrooms. Best practice is for sports fields to be allocated to a single class, which provides greater clarity in the field's purpose and subsequent management. Field conditions. Both staff and the sports groups report that many Sunshine Coast fields are in fair to poor condition. This is largely due to challenges such as poor drainage, insufficient exposure to natural life, inconsistent irrigation during water restrictions, uneven playing surfaces, and a lack of amenities. These issues are often exacerbated by high levels of use. Operationally, maintenance teams work diligently to provide safe and playable fields, but limited resources make consistent, high-quality maintenance challenging, especially given the amount of field use. In addition, the wide geographic distribution of sports fields in the Sunshine Coast further complicates maintenance, leading to inefficiencies due to high travel time. An important component in the current state analysis is to review the bucket data analysis, or the bucket data for sports fields. When we reviewed the 2024 bucket data, we noted a few things. But first, we must state that the bucket data may not actually reflect field usage. For example, user groups may book more field time or fields than necessary to allow options in the event of field closures. In addition, scheduled use of fields by a user group may be cancelled due to poor weather conditions. However, the booking data indicates that the majority of fields are booked more than best practice, as a natural grass field is expected to only have 300 to 600 hours of play per season. The booking data also indicates there is a high demand for field time. We also received usage data from 4 user groups. However, it was challenged and interpreted as the different groups would have each have a unique naming convention for the same fields, making it a challenge to assess the data accurately. This highlights the need for a consistent method of tracking the actual field usage across all Sunshine Coast fields. So in summary, the key findings for the current state of Sunshine Coast fields is that Sunshine Coast fields are in fair to poor condition. There are opportunities to improve field allocation and booking procedures. Clearer field classification definitions will help guide future management and maintenance. Tracking actual usage across all fields clearly and consistently is needed to understand the use of the Sunshine Coast fields accurately. Community needs. In the next few slides, we will review community needs for sports fields on the Sunshine Coast. As noted on this slide, the census data for Sunshine Coast and the projections to 2045 is illustrated. There is a projected population growth that will increase demand for sport fields, although with a lower proportion of youth aged 0 to 14 years in the future. A key component of any analysis is benchmarking. Although it must be noted that it's always challenging to compare local governments, as each local government provides services to their communities differently, and exact comparisons are not always possible. However, benchmarking does offer valuable high-level reference points. The working group indicated Cowichan Valley and Comox Valley as the preferred comparable communities for the Sunshine Coast, as they have similar population counts and distribution, and have publicly available information for the fields for the entire region. Typically, benchmarking does not include school fields, as they are generally unavailable for community buckets. However, they were included in this benchmarking, as the School District 46 is part of the work group, and there may be future opportunities in co-managing some fields. Overall, the benchmarking indicates that there is sufficient Sunshine Coast fields for the population, even with the projected population growth. It must be noted also that each of the comparable communities have an artificial turf field. We undertook engagement with the Sunshine Coast sports field, and this slide illustrates the engagement activities and the corresponding participation in each activity that was undertaken for the strategy. The engagement consists of workshops, questionnaires, online survey, community pop-ups, and user group interviews. And overall, there was very good participation. So what did we hear? We heard from community and the sports user groups that existing field conditions are an issue. Field access with equitable and efficient booking systems is desired. Widespread support for field upgrades, including artificial turf fields. Upgrading the admin facilities is seen to be essential for growing participation and hosting tournaments. Education is needed around field etiquette, especially in relation to off-leash dogs. A component of the engagement also included a follow-up workshop that was held with the sports field user groups in December 2025. At that workshop, we presented key findings from the background analysis and engagement, and we also outlined the draft strategy's high-level directions. Based on all the work done to date, we then developed a vision and guiding principles for the Sunshine Coast Sports Strategy. The vision statement as shown on the slide was developed to guide the operations, management, and development of sports fields on the Sunshine Coast over the next 10 years. The vision serves as an aspirational target for the guiding principles and recommendations. As noted, the vision is grounded in the public engagement results, background analysis, research on best and leading practice, and in discussions with the working group. These 5 guiding principles reflect what is important to the Sunshine Coast and will help guide decision-making for sports fields. These are foster regional collaboration between all government bodies and the school district by engaging with partners, building consensus and aligning with shared priorities. Strive for efficiency in service delivery through coordinated, responsive, and community-focused approaches. Align investments in sports fields and amenities with field classifications to ensure facilities are safe, accessible, and adaptable to changing needs. Consider environmental impacts and promote sustainable practices, including responsible water use. And promote accessibility, equity, and reconciliation to create welcoming spaces for all sports participants and spectators. For the strategy, 3 goals emerged and were identified. And as noted on the slide, they are leverage relationships and collaborative partnerships to enhance sports fields on the Sunshine Coast, improve the quality of sports fields on the Sunshine Coast, and promote community well-being and equitable access to sports fields. Under each one of these goals, there's a series of recommendations. Before I review the recommendations under the respective goals, I need to set the context of how these recommendations could be or would be implemented. There are 3 categories for an implementation plan. Priority levels for each of the recommendations, high, medium, and low. Timeframes for implementation, short, medium, long, and ongoing. And finally, the expected financial implication ranging in dollar value, as shown on the slide. For Goal 1 will be achieved by continued collaboration among the work group, which is essential to delivering consistent service levels and making strategic investment decisions. Key actions include formalizing the roles and responsibilities of the work group, expanding the use of joint use agreements with ST46 and other jurisdictions, improving communication engagement with sports field user groups, and exploring partnerships and external funding opportunities. For Goal 2, which is to improve the quality of sport fields on the Sunshine Coast, the recommendations include Implement a renewed shared sports field classification system with corresponding service levels to guide maintenance, allocation, and capital investment in existing fields. The use of asset management practices to support data-driven decision-making. Targeted capital upgrades such as drainage and irrigation improvements and other improvements. And finally, to manage the sports fields with climate resiliency in mind. For goal 3, the strategy recommends developing a coordinated allocation policy and exploring a centralized bucketing system. This will reduce inefficiencies, improve transparency, and support the collection of accurate usage data. There is also a recommendation to consider charging fees for field use. User fees will encourage sports groups to book only the time they actually need, assist with a data-driven understanding of usage patterns, and can also support maintenance and capital investments in sports fields. The strategy also emphasizes accessibility improvements with universal design principles in mind. Thank you. This concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to the staff recommendation on 4.2, and just here for that report is the adoption of the sports field strategy, and then we'll go back to questions. Thank you. So Manager Huntington, if you want to take this one.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. So the report in front of you today is seeking board support to adopt the Sunshine Coast Sports Field Strategy as presented, to use as a long-term planning and decision-making tool to support coordinated management of sports fields over the next 10 years. And also seeking board support to continue the existence of the working group as it is also a high priority recommendation within the report through terms and adopting a terms of reference to better clarify roles and responsibilities moving forward as a working group. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from directors? Director McMahon.
Here I go again, curmudgeon. No, good report. Outlines a lot of problems that we knew about, but also with some more helpful data behind it, which is good. And the recommendations are pretty straightforward, but I'm having trouble wrapping my head around how this working group is going to work, because we've got 5 participants in this, all of whom are local governments who want to save money. So I can see everybody pointing at everybody else and saying, well, why don't you do that? Like, how is a recommendation going to be formulated and taken to all of our decision makers, all of whom are going to have to agree on it? So, yeah.
I think that one's for staff.
Thank you. I'll attempt to answer the question, and then maybe GM Gagnon could step in as well. I think the first step would be adopting formal terms of reference outlining roles and responsibilities and the goals of the working group, as well as the next step of working on sort of the implementation of the recommendations, which ones are higher priorities, easy to implement. Some of the recommendations in the report will be each of the individual organizations could implement operationally or would be responsible for bringing forward to their respective boards for support for some of the more complex recommendations. But I think the goal is to continue the conversation and continue exploring ways that we can collaborate to, again, improve the delivery of sports field services across the Sunshine Coast in a more efficient manner. Thank you. GM Gagnon?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's also important to recognize that some fields lend themselves to a classification. And so the report doesn't say completely redo your field to achieve a different classification, but it does talk about improving fields. Like we have fields that should be a certain classification, but because of the way they were built, drainage being an issue or lack of sunshine, they're really not. So I think each jurisdiction needs to go back and take this report and look at how it impacts them individually and probably start looking at capital plans and such accordingly. But there are also recommendations in the report that lend itself very well to collaboration in terms of like booking systems or things. So there will be decisions made independent, and there will be decisions that the working group will be hopefully then taking recommendations back to their individual elected, and that those decisions still sit with that jurisdiction at the end of the day.
Yeah, just gonna, like an easy one might be less than 90 references to Shirley Macy Park. That might be a good starting point. So I'm just gonna go to alternate director Bailey, and then I'll come back to you if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, my first comment was that I am assuming that data standardization to avoid 90 references to a single field would be incorporated into the standardized strategy and tracking system and booking system. My question is this. On page 36, it refers to 66% of organizations, user groups participating in the user group workshop and or questionnaire, only a third participating in the user group check-in. And so my question is, can staff, not necessarily in public, but can you internally identify which organizations declined or didn't respond and confirm that targeted outreach to non-participants is planned before the strategy is finalized?
That sounds like it's a question for the consultants. Mr. Banks, would you like to respond? And if staff have any additional information. So, Mr. Banks?
Actually, could you repeat the question again so I'm clear on what you're asking? Sorry, would you mind repeating, please?
Madam Chair? Yes, so on page 36, of our agenda, it would be under the community needs section that you went through. It identified only, 66% participation isn't bad, but then in the user group check-in, that fell to 33%, only 5 organizations out of 15. And I'm assuming that these, Madam Chair, are the stakeholders that have the largest interest in the sports field renewal plan. And so I'm just wondering if there is any targeted outreach planned to those user groups, those key stakeholders that didn't participate.
Yes, so I'll speak to it. Maybe the staff can help me out as well. Jessica can help me out. So my understanding is that our staff did reach out to all of the sports field users. And for this stakeholder engagement session that we held in December, 5 of the primary groups attended, which is soccer and baseball groups primarily. And they did participate, and they were very supportive of their general draft directions at that stage. To follow up and say that we're going to go back to more groups, I think right now the sports field strategy has been posted and has been publicized, so all user groups have had access to it. So I don't know if there's any more engagement going to occur, but I do understand that the strategy has been publicly published and people are aware of it. And the sports groups are aware of it, especially all the sports groups, including the ones that did participate in the stakeholder engagement at the last session, and the ones who didn't. It was pushed out to them. Thank you.
So I'll just maybe add something that could be something part of how the working group operates, is that ongoing opportunity for user groups to be able to engage as trends or issues come up. that there's a way of monitoring that as a group. So that could be something that we are looking for as well. Director Gavious, you have a question?
Not so much a question, but I would like to move the recommendations on page 120 and also say how exciting this is. This is a step in the right direction. It's really exciting to see so many things coming to us and like moving along. And Parks has been very busy, so really grateful for that work. But yeah, this is the first step to many improvements. So I'm very excited to move that.
Do I have a seconder? Okay, we've got a seconder, and Director McMahon, you also had a final question.
Yeah. So there are 5 participants in this. Are all 5 participants going to adopt this sports field strategy and put resources towards it into their 2027 budgets? Or are we just the only ones holding the bag here?
Who would like to try that one? Manager Huntington, do you want to try it?
Thank you for the question, and I will try. Each of the participants in the working group are taking this strategy to their respective elected bodies for seeking support for the strategy and continuing on as a working group together. However, I cannot speak for those elected bodies at this point in time, but that is the intent here with this strategy, is for each jurisdiction to adopt it individually before we move forward. Thank you.
Just
Do you have a follow-up?
Will there be an update coming to us to indicate whether all of the other local governments have adopted this strategy?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we certainly can, and as we come forward with an implementation plan and timelines, that's certainly something that we will bring to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if there's no other questions or comments, I would like to call, GM Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take the opportunity to extend my thanks to the District of Sechelt as well. And they did take a role in helping to facilitate the procurement of the consultant and certainly a leadership role, and all the other participants for this exercise. This is the first of its kind that I'm aware of from certainly our world, our side of the world. And I think it was a really positive experience. As a user group, they don't really know who owns the field, or do they care who owns the field? They just want to know when they book a Class A field, they want to know what they're getting and that it's the same no matter where it is. And I think this is a great step to moving us in that direction. So my thanks to the District of Sechelt as well as the other participants. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was one of the strengths of this whole report, is seeing how the different governments work together, and it just makes so much more sense. So yeah, great, I follow that. Okay, we have a vote. All those in favor? And that passes. The recommendations pass on page 120. Now, we have a choice, folks. We can go on to the Cliff Gilker report for information, or we can have a break, 5-minute break. Where are we at? Good? Let's get Cliff Gilker informational report going, and then we'll have a quick break after that. Go ahead.
I thank you, Chair. There's no introduction for the staff report today, as it's just for information, but we're here and happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. So, directors, we have a report. It's just for information on page 187. Do we have any questions? Yes, Alternate Director Bailey.
Madam Chair, not so much a question, but a comment. Obviously, Cliff Gilker Park being in Area D has been much in conversation in our community. And just the buzz in our community is that although we feel it took some time to get there, that the improvements are much appreciated. And one comment that I received is that it's really refreshing to actually see the work being done on site with wood that is harvested from felled trees within Cliff Gilchr Park. So just want to express our community's appreciation for moving forward on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions about the project? Again, something else that's moving forward. It's really exciting to see. So, okay. If there's no other comments or questions, then thank staff for providing this update, and we look forward to the next one as we bridge across the various streams. So at the pleasure of the board, we're just going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back with the DVP section. Thank you. We're returning from our break, and our next item is 4.4, which is a development variance permit, DVP 00101, and that is for number 13-15200 Hallowell Road. So I have a brief script to read. Do I do that before they speak? Staff speak? I can't remember. Anyway, I'm going to do it anyway. And then you can introduce your report. Actually, no, I'm going to change my mind. Do your report, I'll do my spiel, and then we can go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the setback for a building from the natural boundary of Saginaw Lake from 20 meters to 15 meters to allow for the construction of a single unit dwelling. The applicant has worked with staff and Rapper to come up with a plan that meets the intent of the OCP policy and allows for restoration of the SPIA. The application was referred to the APC by the board and was discussed at the April 9th, 2026 Electoral Area A APC meeting. The APC has reviewed the application and recommended approval. As per the original EAS report, staff have reviewed the application based on the board's DVP policy and recommend that the variance be issued. Staff are happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any questions sticking up, so I'm going to do the script that's required for our development variance permits. Having heard the staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there is anyone in the webinar audience or in the boardroom wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand. If attending virtually, please use the raise hand tool or *6, and I will unmute you in order of hands raised. When you speak, please give your full name and, if you wish, your address for the record. In order to keep our meeting moving, we ask that you please keep your comments focused and limited to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards a recommendation to the board. So is there anyone that would like to speak to this development variance permit? Is there anyone in the, there's no one online. I don't see anyone with their hands raised, so we can just move forward with the discussion of the proposal. Any questions from directors about this variance permit? Seeing none, Director Lee.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 192, please.
And I have a seconder. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. So our next item is 4.5, and this is a preliminary report on zoning bylaw amendment options to address Bill 44, and that's on page 212.
Thank you, Chair.
Staff, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to bring forward a preliminary analysis of bylaw options for consideration that would bring SCRD into compliance with provincial legislation for small-scale multi-unit housing, or also known as SHMU. This requires SCRD at minimum to permit either a secondary suite or auxiliary dwelling unit in all zones that limit residential uses to either a single unit or duplex. Compliance is required by December 31st of this calendar year, approximately 1 year in advance of the targeted OCP renewal completion. Staff have recommended an approach contained in option 1 of this report that seeks to achieve legislative compliance while minimizing the volume of work involved compared to considering additional options that involve further analysis. This approach recognizes that SCRD's OCP renewal project includes a robust engagement plan and scope, including a housing pillar that will allow appropriate consideration of best fit housing options that seek to address known housing needs and balance maintaining community character. This option, if option 1 is pursued, bylaws would be brought forward for readings in Q3, and final adoption can be achieved by the required year-end timeline. Public hearings are prohibited for SHMU compliance. A public information meeting could be considered, but is not recommended for achieving basic legislative compliance, as proposed in option 1. And staff note that the OCP renewal project is following closely behind these updates and is applying a multi-solving approach to housing, including appropriate parameters for considering auxiliary dwelling units beyond where they are currently permitted. Staff are here and pleased to answer any questions. Thank you.
So let's get questions of clarification if you want to start. Director McMahon.
Yes, under our current schedule, when would we get around to amending bylaws 337 and 722 with possibly a new bylaw covering all the areas? What's the ETA on that?
Steph?
Thank you, and I'm going to assume that we're talking through the OCP, the new bylaw across the rural areas. The targeted timeline, that is by year-end 2027. So essentially 1 year after we're required to comply with the SHMU legislation. So it's tailing about a year behind.
A quick follow-up?
I thought that was the OCP. So is not the OCP going to require then zoning bylaws afterwards, or are they being done in conjunction?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. The OCP project includes a new zoning bylaw. So the OCP engagement will inform both the creation of the new OCP and the accompanying zoning bylaw. So the zoning bylaw is essentially one of, but typically seen as the main implementation tool for the OCP in terms of land use. So to have a new OCP without a new zoning bylaw would make the OCP not as effective as it could be because the zoning bylaw is the main implementing tool. So all the good things that we're hearing about engagement and is upcoming on the agenda will help to inform that process moving forward. Thank you.
So are we seeing this as a stopgap measure to just be in compliance? Is that what I understood you say?
Thank you, yes. So that is basically a stopgap to ensure compliance in the interim. It's essentially an interim amendment. Hopefully one of the last times that we'll have to amend it for a non-application specific need. And I would note that the original staff request was to align with the OCP timeline. Following the scope and timeline adjustments to the OCP project, we requested an additional extension, and we were given 6 months despite asking for 18 months. So we got an additional 6 months, which takes us to the end of this year. Thanks.
Other questions? Alternate Director Bailey?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. The first question I have, the staff report says only that the SCRD has completed preliminary studies and found limited capacity for growth within these systems, and many are at capacity. I am wondering, in terms of the Roberts Creek co-housing, I'm wondering if we have any data on the Roberts Creek co-housing, whether it's at capacity and whether there is any room to add ADUs in that area.
Staff, do you have the information to answer that?
Thank you, and yes, and thank you for some of these questions in advance. So I have conferred with my colleagues in infrastructure, and I'll note that infrastructure has been engaged on the SHMU compliance requirements. The reason why we applied for the extension to begin with when these required amendments came forward in early 2024 was because of our wastewater capacity issue was the number one reason. Fire flow and water shortages were also additional supporting reasons. We've done investigations at a preliminary level on all of our, I believe it's 16 different wastewater service areas. I don't have specific data for Roberts Creek co-housing, but I can share that most of these were designed and constructed to essentially handle the density that was built at the time because most of them were developer built. And so further technical assessment would be completed to ensure that we understand where each one is at. And ultimately, the way this bylaw is worded is it puts the discretion at the general manager of infrastructure services to confirm that there is capacity in a specific request. So prior to a building permit for a secondary suite being issued, there would be a check to ensure that that system does have capacity for it. We know that most of them don't have capacity to have a suite in every building. It's in some cases there's a little bit of capacity, but to my knowledge, there's not often capacity for all of the units on the sewer system to have a suite. And so over time, the intent of SHMU legislation is that infrastructure will catch up, and as those different wastewater sewer areas come up for renewal, you know, we would look at it with a lens of ensuring that we can, you know, provide for what the zoning and the legislation is directing. Thanks.
Other questions? I'll go to Director have you asked, or Director McMahon and then Director Lee and, okay, Director McMahon.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is putting a Band-Aid on our zoning bylaw until we can get to really dealing with it. To me, it's largely a theoretical exercise. Like, we know already that 80% of the secondary suites were built without building permits. So there's already secondary suites almost certainly on all of these systems anyway. I have many questions, but I think at the moment that that's just the simplest. I guess the question is, how much work is it to go with option one? It sounds like you're just about ready to go. It's not going to tie us up and tie up the OCP process?
Go ahead, Steph.
Thanks for the question. So staff's approach with option one was to sort of front end load this. So you'll see that there's some, they're not in the typical schedule format, but there's some draft bylaw recommendations that are included. So it would be a formal process of formalizing those. I'll note that no public hearing, public hearings are actually prohibited for basic SHMU compliance. And additionally, as long as you're going with the basic legislation and not adding additional densities beyond the minimum compliance, you don't need to consult with the Ministry of Transportation and Transit as we normally refer our bylaws to them. So the readings could move quite quickly. The target would be to bring forward consideration of readings in Q3 and ensure adoption by year end, hopefully with minimal staff time required to do so, is essentially writing some reports and ensuring the bylaws are accurately crafted. Thank you.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a few questions, but I'll just go one at a time here. Whatever we decide today, and if we decide to send it to our APCs, what would the timeline be? Would that, I'm trying to ensure that it's not going to affect the getting to the end date.
Steph, you review
Thanks.
that, please.
Yes, thank you. So there is a recommendation included in the report to refer it to the APCs, just for overall sort of input and comment on sort of, you know, community character. And I would note that some of what is learned through that could also be taken to the OCP project as part of the overall feedback that we're hearing informing that. That would happen in June. That's the proposal. July would be an alternative. And then at some point in Q3, we could bring back the bylaws for consideration once we've ensured that we've considered what the APCs have recommended. Because of the fact that we don't require a public hearing, these could move quite quick. You could do the first 3 readings in one day, theoretically. You can't do fourth and final, fourth is final, on the same day as third reading. So it would require at least 2 meetings in order to pass this through. Thank you.
Alternate Director Bailey, you had some questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my only other question, Director Bax has suggested that it would be appropriate in Roberts Creek to include the official community planning commission to be consulted as well. So just a question for you, Chair, whether they can be included whether that committee can be included in on this consultation.
I think I'm going to refer to staff on that. And again, I think it's more to do with timing. And because this has got a minimal requirement for review by committees. So if staff would like to respond to that.
Thank you for the question. Staff can certainly make that referral if it's the committee's wish. That could be added to recommendation number 2, that it be referred to the advisory planning commissions and the Roberts Creek official community plan committee. I'm not sure when their meetings are, but we can certainly look at that and make that happen and consider alignment of the next timing for the next report to come forward with consideration of readings based on that. Thank you.
I'm wondering if that should actually come through the director for Area D as a recommendation, which is, it's a bit weird. Anyway, go ahead, Director McMahon. I'm thinking that one through.
Yeah, I'm just, is staff in contact with Lily Lake and Roberts Creek Co-housing to make them aware that this is happening? Because, for instance, the co-housing was not designed with the, I think, intention of having secondary suites on those very small parcels. So they, they have a, yeah, they wouldn't like to be surprised.
Has there been communication with them?
Thanks for the question. Staff were made aware that we were required to comply by year end at the end of March. So we haven't had a chance to reach out to specific service area users. If it's the board's wish, staff can certainly accommodate reaching out to specified user groups that might be more impacted than others. Thanks.
Director Gabias, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. And so the amendment to the bylaw would be sort of a philosophically, we agree that we want more gentle density, which, through ADUs and secondary suites, which, I mean, we're seeing over and over in the engagement that's currently happening. So I feel like there is momentum there. I think most residents understand that that's a good way forward for growth. And then if there are constraints on, say there's a lot that has the zoning, is allowed to build an ADU, but does not have the septic capacity or does not have the requirements to, they cannot go forward. So I'm leaning towards, yes, like we should make sure that everybody can have an ADU, can build an ADU or secondary suite if they are able to within the constraints of their lot. So like, am I understanding this correctly, that, the zoning, the amendment would make it possible if it is possible?
Staff, do you want to just clarify that and also outline how Vancouver Coastal Health fits into this? Because I think that's where we're getting confused as to whose authority is doing what.
Thanks for the question and good question. So this amendment seeks essentially the most basic legislative compliance. There's a few reasons that are noted in the report for that, including provincial guidelines that talk about the minimum lot size for parcels that are not on a community wastewater treatment plant having ADUs, and that's actually 1 hectare. So I'm not a septic expert, but in our consultation with VCH in the past, Vancouver Coastal Health, they've advised that if you want more density, you should be considering a community sewer. I'll note that the most basic subdivision authority, and has been since the late 1980s sometime, is a minimum parcel size of 2,000 square meters. And that is based on the need to have a type 1 septic field. And there's also a covenant area that gets registered for a reserve septic field as well. So it actually takes up quite a bit of space on the lot. While there are other types of septic fields out there, type 2s and type 3s, they're maintenance heavy, and there's a administrative constraint in terms of ensuring compliance with the maintenance of those. So that's the reason essentially for ensuring the minimum lot size of 2,000 square meters. The theory is that would have 1 house on it, and a secondary suite has become sort of an understanding of sort of a basic inclusion in a single family home across the province. ADUs are a little bit different because they do take up space on the parcel in terms of lot coverage. I mean, granted, certainly you could have a world where you have a very small house and a small carriage house, but that's not typically what is seen. So what we actually have right now is based off of the recommendations from the provinces, some of the permissions in bylaw 722 actually go beyond what is recommended by the province. And so we have not gone down the road of consulting with VCH on these basic amendments because we're not required. If we were to look at more density, that would be something that we would want to undertake. I don't know what the response from them would be at this time because we haven't gone there. It may include us doing studies to consider where it's appropriate and where it's not. But again, we don't have those answers yet. That would be another one of the time constraints with moving these amendments forward that staff are concerned about. Thanks.
GM Hall, you have a follow-up response as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to kind of wrap Manager Jackson's comment, the permissions that are proposed with these amendments for regulatory compliance don't alleviate the requirement that any future development on a parcel would adhere to setbacks, lot coverage requirements, or fulfill any other regulatory requirements that might be in place from Vancouver Coastal Health before the issuance of a building permit. Thanks.
Okay, so I just want to make sure your Director Gabias, you're clear. And we've got a couple of requests for clarification, Director McMahon and then Director Lee.
Right, so if we zone something so that you can have an auxiliary dwelling and somebody wants to build it, they still have to get the approval of Vancouver Coastal Health in order to build it. So we can zone for it and then they could be turned down. Is that how it works?
Thanks for the question. So in terms of ones that are on septic fields, not a wastewater service area, which SCRD controls, they would need to comply with all VCH requirements. But when we introduce new zoning permissions, whether it's for subdivision or additional density on properties, it would be standard process that we would first consult with VCH. Typically, existing situations, whether it's a lot that was historically created that was less than 2,000 square meters and happens to be on a septic field, there are solutions for those. But when we consult on new things in our bylaws, then they want us to meet today's standards because they don't want to continue to have sort of, Band-Aid solutions, if you will, of having a enhanced septic field on a smaller lot to accommodate a use. So they want to try and minimize those. So we would want to consult if we were to do more than the basic compliance. But as for any sort of a secondary suite that could be applied for through a building permit, those would make sure that those met VCH requirements before a building permit was issued.
Go ahead.
So we are attempting to increase density and they are increasing sprawl is what's going on here. Like VCH is requiring a minimum size that we cannot vary.
Thanks
Go
for the
ahead,
question.
staff.
So-
It's different regulations, I think.
So
Yeah.
in terms of subdivision minimum lot size, it's 2,000 square meters if you're on a type 1 septic field, which is what the minimum requirement is. They don't approve new lot sizes based off of type 2 or type 3 septic fields. The direction from VCH in those cases is to develop a community sewer to support that density. And so SCRD does have about 16 different cases where we have done that. And I would note that through the OCP project, one of the lenses is considering the efficiency of the delivery of services, including infrastructure, so that when we make such decisions, we do it in a very planned way that helps to ensure that we're delivering the best option in terms of value for the community. And that includes considering those locations so that it's essentially reducing sprawl. Thank you.
Director Lee, and then I have a brief addition, so go ahead.
This is on clarification on that same question, though. It's kind of strikes me as two things. If we were to, if a developer was to propose quarter-acre lots without a septic system, then most likely they would not get approval because the province approves the subdivisions and Vancouver Coastal Health is saying no. But we wouldn't have to make that decision. That would be automatically done for us. Would that be correct? In other words, if Vancouver Coastal Health says, oh, I changed my mind today, now you can have it, we would allow it.
Can you respond to that?
Thanks for the question. In a way, yes. The provincial approving officer ensures that all the referrals are done, including looking at our bylaws and other requirements, including Vancouver Coastal Health. The only challenge would be is that if our bylaw is not in alignment with those other provincial regulations, it creates confusion and a lack of clarity for developers in terms of what the actual potential for the land would be. So that's where we, as staff, we try to make sure that we're making recommendations that ensure our bylaws are clear and consistent with the guiding legislation. And when that legislation changes, as with the small scale multi-unit housing, we make amendments to comply with the legislation so that we're as aligned as we can be. Hope that helps clarify.
I'm just going to add briefly, and then we can get back to Alternate Director Bailey. Is this in our technical papers for the OCP for housing? Because I think just outlining this is the limit, 2,000 square meters per house, really helps frame the conversations going forward. As you know, having those very distinct, this is where we're at in terms of other authorities. So this might be something we could add, or if it's already in there, I just don't remember.
Thank you for the question. My memory is also a little foggy on exactly the details that are in there, but staff can certainly take note and make sure that that is a clear message in our outgoing communications around the OCP renewal project. Thanks.
Thank you. Alternate Director Bailey, you had some further questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's the matter of the Roberts Creek Official Community Planning Commission, but also I noted, and this, obviously, the agenda was extremely long, and in addition to the agenda, there were emails sent around, but, and I can't remember whether it was part of the agenda or one of the emails, but there was at least one APC member that had expressed concern that board direction could potentially be set before APC input could be received, and I'm wondering how that could be taken into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
So I don't mind. I think starting this off is there's a preparation for changes to bylaws, which then would give the opportunity for APCs to look at it. So that's a fairly standard way of providing guidelines to the APCs to look at something, so like a first reading type of thing. It doesn't mean that it's been set, it's just this is the concept, here's the potential wording, let's get your comments back. And I have had an opportunity to think about specifically the OCPC. You are welcome to put a motion forward and see how the board follows through on having that particular group mentioned specifically as an alternate source or another source for this to go out to. Okay. Any other questions, Director McMahon?
Well, I just thought I'd get a motion on the floor. However reluctantly, because frankly, I think this is a make-work project from the province that we didn't need. They should have given us the extra year to get our house in order. But with great reluctance, I would like to move the recommendations on page 212.
Alternate Director Bailey? Are we ready to vote? No. Yeah, go ahead, Director Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a motion to amend recommendation number 2. That recommendation number 2 include the Roberts Creek Official Community Planning Commission, given the importance of the Roberts Creek co-housing septic system. And that Manager Jackson has also indicated that that would be possible to accommodate.
Corporate Officer, you'd like to respond?
Yes, staff would like to request a short recess.
We're going to have a quick recess. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're back in our meeting. Where we were at was a motion to amend a motion that was seconded, and the amendment was to specifically request a referral to the Roberts Creek Official Community Plan, OCPC. And that has not been seconded. Is there a seconder? And because I have a few comments to make.
Madam Chair, or sorry, Chair, I'm happy
can
to,
I-
oh, sorry.
Alternate Director Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I am happy to withdraw the amendment for the time being, pending the Chair's comments.
Thank you. I'm just going to very briefly review sort of where we would be at with adding the OCPC as a specific group to be referred to, although I do understand much of this particular amendment does impact Area D. There are other areas across the whole region where it impacts, and in order to accommodate one specific group would mean other groups would have to be part of that as well. So that was where my concerns were, but I was certainly willing to look at how that motion would go forward. So those are the kinds of things that that kind of gave me pause on how we would word that particular amendment. Go ahead.
Chair, given your comments, I would be happy to direct the RCOCPC to direct their comments directly to Director Bax for this particular consultation.
Yeah, thank you. And we can also make that recommendation to Director Bax as well. So we have a motion that's been seconded. Do we have any comments? Director Lee?
I have several other motions I'd like the board to consider at some point. But we could vote on this and then I could bring them up if that's okay with you, Chair?
I think that would be a correct way of doing it. Yeah.
Okay, because I have questions, but they're associated with a proposed motion. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, so if we're ready to vote, all those in favor of the recommendations on 212? And that passes. Thank you. Director Lee?
Yes, Chair. I have several motions I would like to make, but I also would like to ask some questions of staff before I make the motions to make sure they're reasonable. If that's, can I do that?
Yes, you can.
Yes, thank you. So my first question was if an owner could prove their septic is safe to the SCRD's satisfaction and Vancouver Coastal Health. I'm curious why the size of the lot would be the barrier to an ADU. And I'm referring to, of course, existing lots because historically we have a lot of small lots around and they have septic systems and I'd like to see them being allowed to either have a suite or an ADU on them. I understand the new subdivision problem, but that isn't what I'm considering right now.
Thanks for the question.
Go ahead, Steph.
Through a building permit process, typically the correct wastewater solution is worked out with VCH. I hope that help answers the question.
It's based on some, Chair, may I? Yes. My comments were based on some knowledge of things that have happened. For instance, one of the neighbors got 3 houses on a small lot sitting on a rock and chose to put a more expensive and intensive system in, but it was approved. So we got gentle densification out of that because the owner was willing to put the money out and take the administrative steps to make sure it was done properly. I tend to think that existing property owners should have that same go at it, if you want. So staff comments why we would oppose that?
Yeah, and so, and that, it sounds like it's a difference between septic systems on a private property versus the community liquid waste systems. So that's part of this, isn't it? So staff, can you add to that? Or if there's anything to add?
Thanks, I'll try and be brief here. The referrals that would happen with an existing zoning that's in place on an existing parcel to VCH would ensure that if a building permit is issued, that the correct septic system is proposed. Might be a type 1 in some cases, or it might be a type 2 or a type 3. In the case that we're making new zoning changes, though, that would authorize new permissions that aren't already there, in those cases, we would refer with VCH, which we have not done yet, and get their advice on how to move forward, and at least bring that forward for the board's consideration. So for existing situations, there is a process in place, but to create, sort of add further load to those situations where a more advanced septic system might be required, we would refer those bylaw amendments to VCH for input and consideration. Thanks.
And a reminder, this is just a stopgap till we have better consultation with the OCP. So that's part of this, is limiting how much staff time we're working on this in the meantime. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I have a process suggestion. Given that we just in the last few days reviewed 1,600 pages of agenda, and we only looked at this morning, perhaps we could revisit this when this recommendation comes to the board, and then that would give us a week to perhaps refine the proposed amendments and understand the implications better, because my brain is full.
There are some implications. The public also hasn't had a chance to hear what the proposed motions are at this point, so there's quite a bit extra in there, but it is up to you if you want to move them forward and see what happens. But that is another way of looking at the process and giving us a bit of time to digest today. So it's just a thought. Go ahead.
If that's not going to, if doing that would still allow us to meet our deadlines, I can't see any reason why not to do it. So,
can staff confirm that our deadlines are still okay with that kind of any change in that particular process?
Thank you for the question. So staff's recommendation is for basic legislative compliance. To do more than that would involve additional staff time, referrals to, at minimum, Vancouver Coastal Health and Ministry of Transportation and Transit. I would go as far as to say I would call it more consultation with Vancouver Coastal Health to understand the implications. That would add time and potentially require resource diversion from other operational and project priorities. Another alternate option that could be considered is that if there is a will to consider more than basic legislative compliance, and it sounds like there might be, that some of those questions be directed to the OCP to be answered. I'd note that the timelines are approximately a year apart, and there is a robust consultation process in place as part of that, and it might be a more helpful venue to consider what the appropriate level of densities are for individual communities. Thank you.
So Director Lee, and just a reminder that this, the amendments to the bylaws are going to your APC.
I have this feeling I'm being backed into a corner, and I'm not particularly happy about it.
I just want to say it's not my intent. It is, I understand you're in a difficult position.
Yes, I would have liked to have seen all the options put on the table, and then we decide which ones we are going with, which hasn't, I don't believe, has actually been made clear in the report. So that's actually my problem with this.
Yeah, Director McMahon, yeah.
I would welcome more conversation about this, more discussion about it, because there's a lot of issues here. And I realize that this affects Area A more than the other areas. But I don't think we can make a decision right now, because I think we're a bit overwhelmed on what to do. So can we take this to our APCs and have a really thorough discussion of the implications of this? Because I understand there is an appetite in the community to approve more ADUs. Absolutely. And although we hope that we'll have a new zoning bylaw by the end of 2027, perhaps I'm a cynic. It could take quite a bit longer, and we don't want to hang people up if they're trying to do the right thing and create more housing. But at the same time, this is a bit of a diversion from the process we have in place. So maybe the better way to go would be to reconsider option 3, which is say, sorry, province, we can't do it right now. We'll be back to you.
So I just like to add it. I don't think we're trying to back you into a corner. It's just what I am reading here is there's a hard deadline, and this is how to get through that deadline. And I think that's where the crux of this is, but that there is a process for a more robust look at this in the OCP process. But again, if you want to put a motion on the floor, that is your prerogative.
I could try a couple of the more benign motions to see what happened.
Yeah, we do need to get moving on this. So.
The one that I think is a little bit more benign is that the Area A bylaw 337 be amended to permit ADUs of the same size as already exists in Area B, D, E, and F, particularly in relation to the larger maximum size and 90 square meters.
So what is the full motion on that? That's just one part of it. What do you ask?
That's one aspect of it, yes.
What's the beginning of it? What's the introduction? So we know what the motion is referring to.
Well, we've already done 1 and 2 here, so this would be 3.
So just read it again then as a full motion.
And that Area A bylaw 337 to permit ADUs the same as in areas B, D, E, and F, bylaw 722, particularly in relation to the larger maximum size of 90 square meters.
Can I help here?
Yes.
I think that should be prefaced with, and that staff prepare additional amendments to option 1.
Yes.
Blah, blah. So my question is, what would be involved in bringing bylaw 337 into alignment basically with existing bylaw 722?
Staff?
Thanks for the question. It would likely at minimum involve referrals to VCH and Ministry of Transportation and Transit.
And transit. So that does slow the process down, but if that's, you could try it.
Yes. Seconded.
It hasn't been seconded. So we have a seconder. Any more discussion? Oh, do we have,
The,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't understand why we would have to make referrals when it's already in our bulk of our area, so.
Staff, do you want to clarify why we'd need to do those referrals?
Thanks. It is a change. It is a minor change, and there's different ways to go about doing it. Typically, when you go from a 55 square meter to a 90 square meter auxiliary dwelling unit, you'd probably be looking at 2 to 3 bedrooms instead of likely 1, sometimes sort of 2 bedrooms. That's in the smaller size. So we would refer it to Vancouver Coastal Health specifically for the purposes of just making sure that there is no implications that they see, recognizing that this is for properties that have existing zoning that permit an ADU. So it would be in comparison, or sorry, it'd be comparable to bylaw 722, but we would still do that diligence check with Vancouver Coastal Health. Thanks.
Director Lee.
I should have preferenced this with that these are all proposed amendments to the bylaws, and we're preparing the proposed to send to our APC so they clearly understand what the proposal is. I don't know that we would make those kind of referrals in front of that, except add to the information that we give to our APCs that this might have to happen. That's all I was, because I think the clearer we can give the information to our APCs, the better off we are. That's why I'm in favor of doing proposed amendments, because it makes it quite clear what we're suggesting.
I think that helps provide us with discussion parameters. If that's your intent, that helps us have the conversation. Yeah. So there was no adjustment to the actual motion there. It was just a discussion item. Does that make it clear for everybody as to what Director Lee is asking? Director McMahon.
Very reluctantly, I can't support this because I would rather just go option 3 and because we're adding more work and we've already got a huge amount of work that we're trying to move through. And I really appreciate the urgency of this situation in Area A. We did discuss amending bylaw 337, 2 years ago? And maybe we should have done that at that time because it does take a long time for the zoning bylaw to be amended. And in the meantime, people are waiting. So I get that. But at the same time, we've already got a highly complicated process underway. And I'm reluctant to add more paperwork. Thank you very much, province.
Director Gavious.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to understand the potential gains. Like if we were to go ahead with this now, understanding that we have to go to VCH and MOT, like how much time would this buy us if we're looking at the other option would be end of 2027? Like how much of a gain of time would we get if we were rolling now with this? How much more? Yeah, like if we wait until the OCP process plays out, the changes, the amendments would be enacted like at the end of 2027, so like a year and a half from now. If we were to go ahead with this amendment to 337 now, and then go through the process of VCH, like how much, like when would that when would this amendment take effect?
Does that make sense, staff? And I think GM Hall is asking to weigh in.
Thank you, Chair. Staff, it's difficult to hypothesize on, firstly, the response times for agency referrals and what the content we might get back in terms of comments might mean for what we do next. The maximum time difference between options here would be 12 months. And I'll guess that a minimum time difference is something like probably 3 months. Thanks.
So maximum 12 months, minimum 3 months. in terms of time difference for this to go through versus it going through the OCP, which is 12 months.
Yeah, if perhaps staff could clarify.
Thank you. Staff estimate that if we started right now on a project that's currently not designed or resourced, so we need to figure that out. If we were directed to undertake more than the legislative minimum, the referrals would probably add at least 3 months to the project timeline, likely to push us slightly into 2027. So let's imagine a future where we're done by the end of Q1 2027. Our current project timeline for the official community plan and the board's direction for compliance prior to not being granted this extension was December 31st of 2027. So a difference of up to 9 months. Yeah, thanks.
So I hate pressuring people, but we're at noon. We still have our biggest item still to do. Alternate Director Bailey.
Very quickly, Chair, this sounds like a pretty important issue, if I understand it correctly, an equity issue, bringing alignment between Area A and the other areas. However, I also understand Director McMahon's concerns. Would this issue be organically dealt with in the OCP renewal in any case?
Manager Jackson.
Thank you for the question. Yes, the mandate for the OCP scope is integration. So that means considering where possible, integrating and aligning our bylaws. So in answer to that, specific to the auxiliary dwelling use, permitted uses and sizes, it would be looking at aligning those where possible through the proper referrals and consultation with those ministries. Thank you.
So we have a motion. It's been seconded. Are we ready to vote? Director McMahon.
Part of the difficulty here is that we don't fully understand the implication, right? And that's why I was wondering if we could come back and look at this again. Well, actually, we can revisit it at board. So maybe that's the best thing to do, is just look at it. Yeah, come back as business arising or recommend.
Okay, final word to Director Lee, and then I really need to move on.
Just procedurally, this would be a corporate officer question. If I withdrew that motion, could we then consider it again at board?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. If the motion's been seconded, it now belongs to the committee and it cannot be withdrawn. So you need to either vote on it or amend it to refer it, but it's on the floor now, so it cannot be withdrawn.
Yes, it was seconded.
So I'd have to actually ask for an amendment to refer it to board?
No.
Yes.
It's going to go to board. It always goes to board.
Corporate officer, can you clarify, please?
Yes, if that's the desired action to refer the motion to board, then you could propose that amendment before the vote.
We really have to.
Yeah, my concern is if this is voted down right now, that I can't resubmit it to the board as the process I understand. So that's why I would have to make an amendment.
You can't, but somebody else could. Director McMahon.
I'm going to support this so that we can get it on the table and then we can have this discussion again at board.
Are we all okay with that strategy? Can we have a vote on the motion? Is everybody clear on what the motion is? Yes. Everyone's clear. Okay, good. So all those in favor? And that passes. And thank you very much. No.
I have another one.
Okay. Director
it's-
Lee,
it'll
this
be
is
quick.
really hard because
I promise it will be quick.
we're like 5 after 12 and we still haven't got to the bulk of our meeting.
Yes, this is another question. Can I ask the questions, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. If a parcel has the water and septic capacity to support a secondary suite, then I'm curious why a detached ADU couldn't be allowed in place of that secondary suite.
That's definitely a planning question. Go ahead, Manager Jackson.
Thanks for the question. It's actually more of an engineering question than a planning question. So in a sense, basically, it's Vancouver Coastal Health's guidelines that they look at when they consider our bylaw referrals to them. So the process that they have for stuff that is in place and existing today is different because there's solutions. There are technical solutions out there that can be found to make things work. Some of their concerns around those include like the long-term maintenance of those with more complex systems. So their default is the basic type 1 when they're considering most of the amendments. So again, it would be more of the consultation with them to understand that a bit more robustly. I note the provincial guidelines around small-scale multi-unit housing are actually for a minimum of 1 hectare for an auxiliary dwelling unit when you're not on a community sewer system. So at this time, again, staff haven't gone deep into this. We've just taken the information before us and brought it forward with the options. Thank you.
Director Lee. Oh, Jam Hall.
Sorry, Chair, I felt it was important to elaborate the engineering piece with the planning answer, which is technically there may or may not be differences in those strategies. As noted on page 5 of the report, there's also differences in built form, neighborhood character, and consideration of lot coverage. And the regional district hasn't undertaken community consultation on that change specific to this regulatory compliance piece. Work is underway through the OCP renewal project to assess community interest, acceptance, concerns, strategies, et cetera, to address those differences. Thanks.
Does that help you?
I'm going to drop it. It confuses the heck out of me because a suite's going to have the exact same load on the infrastructure as a detached dwelling of the same size. So if we're going to allow suites, which is what we've already said we're going to do, I can't wrap my head around the fact that an ADU instead of a suite wouldn't be acceptable.
I think it's something to do with lot coverage, but anyway, I think this is a
I
good
understand the lot coverage, of course.
OCP question. So with your patience, if we could move on, and then we won't let this drop, Director Lee. I know it's very important to you and to Area A. It's a significant issue.
Yes, I'm a little impatient perhaps, but all other areas have had this gentle density allowed years ago. And we are proposing to add another year, which is really hard for me to let go. But anyways, we can talk, as Director McMahon suggested, we can talk about it at board when we're all better prepared.
Great idea. Okay, thank you, Director Lee. Okay. We are at just after 5 after 12, and we are now at, oh my gosh, look at this. We're at the 4.6 Official Community Plan Renewal Project Phase 2, and that starts on page 234. And Planner Clark, are you going to introduce this? Thank you.
Thank you. The team is pleased to bring you a summary report on the completion of Phase 2 OCP engagement. As some of you have already noted, you're receiving a large volume of feedback today. This is a reflection of many committed, engaged citizens who have ideas to share and who are deeply committed to the future of the Sunshine Coast. The team would like to begin today's presentations with an offer of gratitude for all the different ways that Sunshine Coasters showed up and participated in this phase of engagement. The OCP will be stronger for it. As part of the board's scope for OCP renewal project, there is an adopted engagement strategy. In addition, each phase of engagement has its own specific goals approved by the board. The purpose of this phase of engagement is up there on your screen. The purpose was to consult with Sunshine Coasters on possible locations for future growth to meet our housing needs and to collect feedback from our communities on regional growth priorities and the land use organizing framework. The volume and quality of feedback that you see in the reports and submissions today are also a reflection of a process designed to capture and incorporate feedback in many different ways. The report that we're looking at right now summarizes SCRD-led Phase 2 engagement efforts. A subsequent staff report on this agenda includes even more feedback received, and my colleague Matt Thompson will introduce that report when we're finished with this item. Here's a timeline you've seen a few times before. Phase 2 engagement is the second of 3 phases. If you'll note the bright blue squares on your screen, those are the opportunities for participation, and you'll see that there are 2 more coming in addition to this one. So what we heard report, you've seen one already, today is the second one. It is a factual summary of feedback received. This report is for information only. There are no decisions today associated with this report. The What We Heard report does not include any interpretation of what it means for the community, the OCP, or the SCRD. You have a summary in terms of numbers on your screen right here, 192 in-person conversations, inputs from 78 workshop attendees, 683 comments collected, 326 online questionnaire responses, and to date, 17 interviews conducted. If you're looking for a summary of what we heard, I'll first say there is an executive summary at the front end of the report, but I'd also draw your attention to pages 13 and 14, where there is a summary of the 62 themes of what we heard. So this report does not stand alone. It is combined with the Youth What We Heard report that you heard last June, the Phase 1 engagement report that you heard and received last October. It's also combined with the project direction that you gave the project team, the technical analysis you've received to date, and legislative requirements, along with more What We Heard to come. What happens next? I mentioned each of the drafting reports to date inform the OCP drafting decisions that will be before you in June and also possibly July. The team did bring a policy evaluation framework in April, the previous meeting to this one, where we provided an overview of how we will work through and analyze some of the submissions that we've received, as well as the policy proposals that you will review in June. Beyond the drafting decisions, these reports inform the full life cycle of the project, the drafting, but also beyond. There may very well be implementation items that extend beyond the duration of this particular project, where the feedback that we are receiving today and have received to date will continue to inform how our community grows and how we take our next steps. So here to take any questions that you may have about the process.
Thank you, staff. And I think I'd also like to extend our thanks on behalf of this committee for the 500-plus pages of input from the community, from individuals, and the work that staff have done to put it together. Directors, comments? Remember, there's no decisions here. It's just for information. Director Lee.
I must say it's a lot of work that's been done on this already. And the reports are quite clear, which I like. I don't have no idea how you're going to boil down all those comments, though. But the one question I have is, we're going to do a draft pretty soon, but will the draft make it clearer how the individual concerns that are unique to one or two of our regional districts will be addressed?
Staff? Would an example be helpful?
Sure, the lakes in Area A, right, have unique needs.
Thank you very much for the question. There are existing unique policies in the OCPs, and part of your direction to this team was to bring those unique policies into, and unique characteristics and features of each community into the OCP where we can, to maintain and or enhance what currently exists.
I guess that would be the same with the industrial Domtar. And how does that fit in? Things like that, yeah.
Yes, I guess I was kind of wondering if it's going to be a separate appendix, or we just try to put it into the body with the right language. I guess it's probably a little early to ask that question, though.
Is there any sense of what it's going to look like structurally?
Thank you for the question. In relation to the report that we're looking at right now, I'll say no. The What We Heard report doesn't have specific direction related to the structure that the document takes. However, in the reports that you received last month, we do anticipate bringing forward some suggestions in the decisions that are included in June and possibly July related to the structure of the report.
Other directors, Director Gavious.
Thank you, Chair. Another exciting document here for us. I want to just give us a special thanks to the Half Moon Bay CDF, who put together a workshop that I thought was very successful and a great way to gather more feedback and to have that conversation in the community. And the report was great. It's great to have and to include in there. And obviously to everybody who submitted comments. My question, I don't know if it's a question, but one thing that really jumps up to me reading the letters from Mott, the letters from the Shishal Nation, is like we have a lot of advocacy in front of us. Like there's a lot in there that we can talk about and see, like, you know, UBCM I know is approaching and resolutions are due, but I feel like there's a few good things in there that we could take to ministers or to UBCM for advocacy. One specific question that I have is reading the letter from the Shishal Nation asking that planning and regulatory frameworks should reflect Shishal Nation laws, policies, and decision-making systems, including requirements for early referrals and ongoing consultation from development proponents. Do we have what we need to do that? Like, what would that look like? And do we have the tools and the resources to do what our partners are requesting from us? Thanks.
Great question. Staff? GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. There are a number of things in the letters from governments and agencies where staff will be seeking additional clarity on expectations in order to be able to bring kind of scoping information forward. Assessing what can reasonably fit within an OCP, which is prescribed by the Local Government Act, versus what might be handled through some other tool or avenue will be part of that follow-up work. So directors can expect more information on aspects coming out of those letters. Thanks.
Alternate Director Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. And I think General Manager Hall answered my first question, but I wanted to point out, and I mean, obviously I'm somewhat new to this, but the Mott letter did strike me as being unusually direct in identifying which areas can absorb density and which cannot. But I believe that the General Manager has answered that question, but I just wanted to kind of publicly point that out. My actual other single question is looking across the engagement reports. Both Half Moon Bay and Roberts Creek independently flagged the same gap, that the OCP has a housing pillar and an environment pillar, but no economy or livelihood pillars. Both communities appear to want to enable home-based business, cottage industry, small-scale commercial and local employment, and the land use organizing framework doesn't clearly accommodate these uses. So my question, Chair, to staff, will the OCP drafting include a neighborhood, commercial, or local economy component to address what appears to be a coast-wide gap?
Staff, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much for the question. Existing in our current OCPs and zoning bylaw is direction around home-based business and other economic and livelihood-based direction. So those would carry forward into a new OCP. Staff are following board's direction in terms of focus on 2 pillars. Obviously, we have received more feedback beyond the pillars that will be taken into consideration as we go forward into the drafting process.
Any other questions? Director McMahon?
Yeah, just a comment that I struggle, and I think most people struggle to kind of identify what's part of the OCP, what is really part of the zoning bylaw, and where the heck does Vancouver Coastal Health fit in this whole thing? Because there was a reference in their letter to older septic systems, suggesting that a lot of them are failing. But, you know, I've never heard anybody in my area mention a failing septic system. Is this a big problem around here? Do we... It's pretty frustrating trying to communicate the requirements of Vancouver Coastal Health when it looks like they're trying to solve a problem that we don't have. So I'm wondering, even if we did a lunch and learn as a board, or we can talk to our APCs and see if some more education would be beneficial in trying to tease apart the pieces of this puzzle so that we can better respond. Like the whole question of coach house suites, for instance, on a lot that's only 3 square feet short of the minimum required for an ADU, is there any way that that can be addressed? Things like that. Sorry, I'm rambling.
Is there a clear question to respond from staff? GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I can offer a general comment that per the project timeline, before the end of July, the board will be invited to make decisions about a drafting mandate, the direction that we are going with a new OCP and a companion zoning bylaw. And a piece of the information that will come forward to help make those decisions will be some scrutiny on what fits in a zoning bylaw, what fits in an OCP. And while I can't commit to specifics around septic regulations being part of that, through that next step, some clarity will emerge on the scope of an OCP and other things that we might do around land use planning, advocacy to other regulators, et cetera. Thanks.
Other comments or questions? One of the questions I had in this general report right now is, how do we speak to our public about this? It's exciting that we have this and that we can disseminate it, but it doesn't have any framing around it, which is the intent. It's how do we frame it? How do we, with confidence, say, this is, your ideas are going to be acknowledged? Is that something we have to do, or where do they go forward? And what's the difference between ideas that are clearly within our two pillars or ideas that are quite different and outside of general OCP? Like, how do we address the different ideas that are in here? Are we going to do that ourselves, or is that going to come from staff? How do we respond back to all this? I think that's always that gap in this kind of process, is all this information comes in, and the people that have worked really hard on it don't necessarily get a clear sense of what's going to happen to their idea. Just a little question.
Thank you for the question and the concern that's behind it. There is a series of communications that are intended to support the general community in understanding the next steps and the relationship to what we're presenting right now. The team is also preparing supports for you as project champions to be able to communicate with your communities, your individual communities, your APCs, and others. A news release, for example, is planned for the end of this week. And there are ongoing updates to the Let's Talk page. The Let's Talk page is always the go back to location that has the most current information to help direct folks to. If you have other suggestions for how you would like to be supported as a governance team, we are open to hearing those suggestions. Thank you.
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I also wanted to add to what Planner Clark said that staff have sent thank yous to submitters and advised them that this agenda was published. And we don't exactly know what or when this will look like, but we have planned for a feedback loop during the drafting process to stay in contact with those who have submitted, to keep them apprised of where things are at, and if and where we can, demonstrate how their input was used. So very much built into the project plan, and that's coming from the engagement strategy that the board directed. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we're still on 4.6, but we are sliding into 4.7. Yeah, it's just all together. I do want to follow up on that one question, and it's based on alternate Director Bailey's question about specific to home-based business and that feeling that potentially economics and livelihood was not part of the pillars. That is a question that is coming up frequently, and that is the type of question that needs some kind of response, either in the Let's Talk, just to say this is where that particular question sits within the process, I think, because I'm not sure we gave a satisfactory response, and I know it does come up quite a bit. So, okay, so we have this for information. There's a separate presentation or response to 4.7, the renewal project phase. So this is the engagement strategy or engagement summary. Would somebody like to introduce this? Here we are. and whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to present the second part of today's engagement, Phase 2 engagement, a brief summary of additional feedback from Phase 2 that was outside of the board-adopted focus for engagement. In order to ensure community had multiple avenues to provide feedback, including on complex topics outside of the Phase 2 engagement questions, staff developed a policy proposal template, which was available on the Let's Talk webpage from late February to early May. Our goal when receiving community input was to find a way to say yes to receiving and considering these submissions in a range of formats. Staff would like to thank the many individuals and community organizations who took significant time and effort to submit proposals and ideas that will help strengthen this official community plan. The OCP is a community document, and these submissions are absolutely key because they ensure that the community can weigh in on issues of importance to them. Overall, they've made this a stronger, more robust process. During Phase 2, we received a number of important inputs that are attached to this staff report. These include 2 comprehensive reports summarizing community engagement in Half Moon Bay and Roberts Creek, 2 emails from community providing more general feedback, and 24 policy submissions, including 14 related to the climate and environment pillar and 9 related to the housing pillar, with some touching on both, and a number of submissions that focused on topics outside the pillars. The volume of submissions highlights that staff's efforts to raise awareness of the project have been successful. They also highlight the volume of work that the community has undertaken, and now staff have lots of work to do to give them careful consideration and review. Because of the quick timelines and the volume of submissions since our closing deadline of May 4th, staff have only undertaken a preliminary review to date of submissions to provide some high-level statistics about the relationship between the proposals, the project pillars, and SCRD's jurisdictions. These figures may be subject to change as staff engage more comprehensively with the proposals. So we found that about 2/3 were of the submissions, and this is the 24 submissions that came in as policy submissions. About 2/3, or 67%, were primarily and directly tied to one or both pillars. And an additional 13% had a strong relationship with the pillars, but may have also covered topics outside of the pillar focus. The remaining 20% were primarily focused on topics outside the pillars, such as economic development and agriculture. Additionally, 67% of the submissions appear to be directly or primarily within SCRD jurisdiction. I should note that this is not the same 67% that were closely tied to the pillars, but there is overlap there. 29% had items that were within SCRD jurisdiction, but also had items that may be beyond our jurisdiction or would require an advocacy or partnership approach, or partnership role for the SCRD. The remaining 4% were outside SCRD jurisdiction. An important note to highlight is that the volume and quality of submissions provide value to the organization beyond this project alone. These submissions will be shared with other departments to raise awareness of community proposals. Finally, during the next drafting phase, a reminder that staff will review policy proposals using the policy evaluation framework that was approved in April at the EAS meeting. A reminder that there will be 2 decision points during this evaluation. Level 1 evaluation focuses on legislative requirements, alignment with the 2 pillars, and the OCP is an appropriate tool for specific policies. And Level 2 evaluation focuses on complexity, feasibility, timelines, and alignment with organizational priorities and impacts. Any policy proposals that do not easily align with evaluation criteria will be brought back to the board for consideration, and all policy decisions will be referred back to the board for decision. Finally, as proposals are evaluated, a feedback loop with contributors is being considered, as noted by GM Hall, to ensure that there's transparency on the process moving forward. Thank you. Happy to take questions or comments.
Thank you. Again, huge amount of work. Directors, Director McMahon.
Yeah, just thinking about the really big picture here for a second. So we decided to limit the scope of this particular OCP review to 2 pillars because we wanted to eat the elephant one bite at a time. But in this process, things are being identified that either we may want to pursue for advocacy at the provincial level or with other agencies. But there's also issues that we probably want to come back to in future OCP reviews. So are we going to do we have a parking lot? Do we have a roadmap? Do we have something? Home-based businesses is a really good example. That was staff and the community consultation did quite a dive into home-based business back in 2018 when bylaw 722 was put together. But it's probably time in a few years to go back and look at it again, because it's like everything else in our neighborhoods, it's a moving target. People are increasingly working from home. So, have we hit the right balance? And is there advocacy we can do with other levels of government to address some of the associated problems that we've had with home-based business? So I guess the question is, somewhere in the air, are we going to have a bigger game plan?
Staff, how are we addressing the other?
Thanks for the question. So as Planner Clark mentioned earlier, the adopted scope includes the 2 pillars, but it also includes integration. So integration will involve bringing forward all of those good policies and community visions that exist within the existing OCPs. As part of that, we can consider some of the feedback that we're receiving and how to enhance those policies. So while they're not necessarily pillars, they can still be looked at in terms of, is it hitting the right mark as we look to integrate them. The scope also includes an implementation plan. And so through that implementation plan, there is an ability to sort of direct future work, think about how that can be prioritized. Is provincial advocacy needed, for example, in order to move something else forward? So the project is scoped to take these sorts of things into account in that way, and leave space for future projects as well, because as mentioned, it is a bit of a moving target sometimes, and so keeping the bylaws up to date is important. Thanks.
And through the chair, in terms of a parking lot, one of the intentions behind the policy evaluation framework is to create a well-documented structure for moving community submissions and proposals through a formal process that will track all of them, so that we know where they're going, and if there are some that are maybe not the right fit for an OCP, but maybe useful elsewhere, to bring back that information to the board for further decision and consideration.
Just a personal preference. I don't like the term parking lot because it implies nothing's going anywhere without any energy. So let's come up with a different term that implies movement. Director Gavious.
I vote for bike rack, not parking lot. I have a question. When we're talking about the pillars, so for example, we didn't make agriculture like a pillar. But we've been shown through like One Straw Society's submission that it can be, food systems can be woven into OCPs. So when we're looking at a submission, say like One Straw, are we putting it on the bike rack, or are we saying like how can we incorporate that within the lenses of environment and housing?
Steph?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, so the housing and environment and climate pillars do allow for consideration of appropriate consideration of other adjacent policies, I'll call them. So certainly, we live in houses, we need food. It's part of an overall spectrum of considering climate and environmental impacts, including climate change on agriculture. And also, again, moving forward, existing policies around agriculture, there is an ability to look at those and make sure that they are looking or sort of hitting the right mark, even though that we're not actually having them as a separate pillar. Thanks.
Alternate Director Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I had many questions, but I've cut them down to the 2 that are most important, and Director Gabius actually asked my first question. It was all about agriculture. So I'd just like to comment. I'd like to really reinforce what the director said, but also even go as far as to suggest that an OCP agricultural working group be considered. My second question is that the package included a substantially expanded analysis. It actually came from Half Moon Bay residents in Appendix Q, and I thought it was an excellent point, quantifying that the Sunshine Coast peak summer population is approximately 60% higher than the resident base. The Chapman water system data independently validates this calculation. Average demand is 13.5 meters cubed per day, peak 21.5 meters cubed per day, which is roughly the same as that 60% increase. So it's just some confirming data. We are sizing infrastructure to a number that is documented to be wrong for half the year. Will the OCP infrastructure planning sections adopt a weighted peak daily seasonal population methodology modeled on places such as Tofino and Whistler? And can this be used as documented basis for senior government infrastructure funding applications?
Staff, that is a very specific question from the 500 pages of really good data. So I'm going to give staff a bit of a wide response, given that it's just sort of how do we generally deal with those kinds of questions that are coming out of the submissions that we received. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
Staff? Go ahead, GM Hall.
Thank you. As Senior Planner Thompson noted in the introduction, staff haven't undertaken comprehensive analysis of every proposal or sub question in these submissions. We know there's high alignment with the focus areas for the OCP, and during the drafting process, which will follow some directional decisions coming up for the board, these things can be looked at more closely. So a process is in place to address those types of questions that might arise from these submissions. Thanks.
And I think in reference to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, that would be a decision of the board based on information that's coming through this process. So I think that's something we will be considering in the future. Okay, can we move on? And again, thank everybody for the huge amount of work that this represents, and that this is just one step, and we're looking forward to next month for actual decisions based on some of this information. So thank you. So now we're at 4.8, ports monitoring, and I'm just looking at 4.8 to 4.11, and if there's any questions or comments or motions arising from those four sets of minutes, if we could look at them all together, I'd appreciate that. Just trying to move us along. So anybody, Alternate Director Bailey?
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, I'll be very, very brief. I just want to flag that 3 APC reports contained significant discussion around fire flow action plan, and each APC made specific recommendations. I just wanted to really highlight and flag that. That's all, Chair.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the discussion for those APCs, is there was no request for decisions or recommendations coming out of that, but it did create a lot of discussion, and it was eye-opening for everybody. So yeah, that's so if there are specific motions coming out of these, Director McMahon.
Yeah, there was a recommendation from the Area E APC, which is on page 836 of the package. And it's, I'm not sure that I specifically want to move this recommendation. because I'm not quite sure what it involves. But the question is about residents being able to protect their own properties. You know, set up their own properties so that they can protect them in case of a fire. And, you know, this has been an issue right across the province. And I'm wondering if there is some way that we can publicly discuss, engage, whatever, maybe through the emergency program would be the appropriate place to consider the question of, you know, what can and should homeowners do to protect their properties? And what do we maybe not recommend? I don't know if staff have any suggestions or if there's any possible follow-up here.
And I really don't want to go down this rabbit hole right now, but is there a way of moving this to another point so we can address it? CEO?
Yes.
Good. Yes.
So we have discussed this in various different forums in the past, some of which has been in camera to discuss some of the risk and implications of doing that. So we can surface those type of reports for directors to refer it to a subsequent discussion for the board, staff reports, et cetera. We'd probably want to revisit a motion of some context. It wouldn't be something we'd want to, that we'd necessarily surface as part of from staff's perspective.
Can I ask you bring it up later? Gia, or Director McMahon, go ahead.
I was just going to try and do a motion to ask staff to point us at any resources that we already have on this topic that
Okay.
I can share with my APC. Would that be helpful, or?
CEO?
We wouldn't be able to share any legal opinions with APCs. Those would be, but we could probably provide some generic information as we have to certain type of community groups that, say, have applied for grant and aids, as an example. So we could try to cobble something together. I don't think we'd have to need necessarily a motion. I could work with directors to forward that to directors and see what we can provide publicly for consumption.
There
is quite a bit out there too, but anyway, go ahead.
I can take this back again to my APC, because just saying, well, yes, we have legal opinions, but we can't tell you anything is just not terribly helpful. Homeowners really want to protect their properties. So pointing them towards resources that can help them would be useful.
Let's yeah, go ahead. Yeah, CEO.
FireSmart is the best resource right now, and we have a very well-funded and robust program with qualified staff, and so they are the best to advise homeowners at this juncture. So that's the best resource to refer them to now.
Okay, Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This hopefully is a quick question. My APC recommends that an SCRD staff member attend their next meeting in person to provide more information on the fire flow action plan. I was just wondering from staff if that was a possibility.
And I'm gonna add to that because I got into a bit of a pickle trying to fully explain fire flow.
So we have reports coming to the next Committee of the Whole for May 28th. So that's going to provide more detailed information. And some of that might clarify some of the information. So perhaps that would be advisable to review what those reports provide, and if there's subsequent questions or information that APCs would like to see, that could be provided at a subsequent meeting.
Any other questions? Seeing none. We have no new communications, no new motions, no new business. The in-camera is this afternoon's meeting continuation of our in-camera? Is it an in-camera or is it a special? Special, it's separate. So we have no in-camera meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Lots of hands, that's seconded. All those in favor? Thank you.